Last week, I posted a really quick announcement, a giveaway announcement to Sasquatch and his buddy, is it Nate? I believe it was Nate. And I posted that I'm giving Sasquatch a VG10 Ryusen that's designed by me. And then a lot of you guys actually wrote me and asked me to do a video on it. I've never done a video on that knife because I only made 100 of them, and I figured that it might be a little bit too unfair for me to post a review of my own knife that I designed. And that's partly why you guys haven't seen many reviews on my white number 2, blue number 2 knives on my channel, or the VG10 for that matter, just because I didn't want to do a whole lot of like self-promoting of my knives. But a lot of you guys have been asking for it, so that's why I'm going to do a really quick kind of a snippet video and tell you how that knife came about and what's special about it, in my opinion. About 6 months, even before I went to Japan last year, I was actually very curious about Ryusen knives. So I actually bought a pretty big batch of them. And if you guys recall, I did a kind of just a really quick unboxing of the Ryusen knives. From the initial purchase, I used 2 of their knives in my kitchen full time for about 6 months. The Bunsen Ryu, which is a VG10, Damascus cladded, and we have the Blazon, which is this knife right here, the SG2. Both 210s is what I kept in my kitchen for a little while. And without going overboard and without trying to oversell how good their knives are, I really fell in love with their knives. And so, I basically kept on using it. It was initially going to be like a 1-month trial in my kitchen and then do a review video. I kept the SG2 and the Bunsen Ryu in my kitchen for about 6 months. And Ryusen is a really interesting company. They're based in Ichizen, and in Ichizen, you don't see a whole lot of knife factories per se. You see a lot of artisans that are working with like small teams of 2 or 3 different people, but you don't really see many knife factories. And that's kind of how Ryusen is. Even though they are technically a factory, they're all artisans working there, and so their knives come out extremely high quality. Now, Ryusen's history is actually pretty interesting because the founder of Ryusen, he's actually the son of Hitoshi Masutani, who was a knife polisher for a span of about 47 years or so. Now, Hitoshi-san's polishing work was well known all over Japan, and in 1948, he was recognized as the best knife polisher in Japan. His son Hiroshi Masutani founded Ryusen in 1953. And what's really cool about that is that Hiroshi was a knife sharpener inside of Ryusen for 67 years before he passed away in 2016. That is something that you don't really hear about these days. To have a person who founded a company who is a knife sharpener for the company for 67 years, that is just an incredible story. And knowing that history was what really drew me to that company. So fast forward 6 months from the initial purchase of the Ryusen knives, and I thought, you know what, I'm going to Japan. How cool would it be to meet the people at Ryusen? So I made a few phone calls. Well, actually, it was one phone call. And I got a meeting with the folks over at Ryusen. And so I don't remember exactly what day it was that I met them, but I believe it was 3 or 4 days after I arrived in Japan. In Ichizen, I met the folks over at the village, Takafu Knife Village. Yu Kurosaki, Ikeda, Anryu, and a host of other people, Kato-san. It was just a really cool trip. Within a day of meeting all those knife artisans, I got to meet the folks over at Ryusen. And we sat down, we had a really nice meeting over some tea. That's what you do in Japan. We had a really nice open-ended conversation about their knives, about what I'm doing, what my goals are. And one thing led to the next. An offer was made for me to make a few knives with them, and it was accepted. And so they agreed to make 100 knives for me. When you look at the history of Ryusen and understand their history and see how their knives have progressed, you understand why their knives are so well fit and finished, because the company founder was the son of the man who was recognized as the best polisher in all of Japan. He had to carry part of that lineage into his company, Ryusen. We're talking rounded spines, seamless bolsters, high polished tang all the way around from the front to the back side of the handle. Their knives are impeccable. And so they had a batch of knives that they were kind of ending the production on, which was the VG10 series that I got. It was a two-piece bolster design, which they were phasing out. So that specific design was being phased out altogether. They weren't going to make any more in favor of the new contemporary high-polished bolster, high-polished spine, a rounded spine, and also just the overall new contemporary look of their current knives. And knowing that that design was going to be phased out altogether, I thought it'd be really cool to have a knife design with that bolster. And so the fit and finish, again, it's still great in fit and finish, but it doesn't have the mirror polish as what you'll find on the current Ryusen knives. And the other major reason why I wanted to keep that muted look was because of price. Now, if you look at Ryusen knives that are being sold today with the new contemporary design that they've got, the base price of a 210 millimeter for a VG10 is $300. For most people, that's just way out of their price range. So with that in mind, I wanted the quality of the Ryusen knife that I always have loved, but also keep it down at a more moderate rate. And so we went away with all of the high polishing, the mirror finishes that you normally would find on their contemporary lineup, and got a knife that has all of the great fit and finish of a classic Ryusen. All of the edges around the spine, the choil, the tang are all nicely polished. You still have the classic grind of the Ryusen knives, and so we were able to achieve all of that for under $130. That was something I was really proud to announce when I got this knife. So with all those details worked out, we were also able to include the Rikitran laser etch logo on the right side and the VG10 Made in Japan logo on the left side. So I was really excited about that. My trip to Japan was in July of 2019, and then in January, February of 2020, these knives went live on my e-store. And I didn't really talk about them at all. I haven't mentioned them on my channel other than a couple of giveaways here and there. But now I've got a couple dozen left, and that's part of why I didn't do it, because I only had 100 of them for sale, and so I didn't want to make a big announcement about them, because a lot of folks who may want one may be disappointed that they're sold out. But since my giveaway of last week, a lot of folks have been asking for it, and I thought it'd be fair to just talk about this knife. So that's the Riki VG10 by Ryusen. Now to the Naniwa Pro 800 3000 combo stone Riki edition. Now, for those of you guys who have been with me on Perfection since I started back in 2017, you guys know I love the Naniwa 800 3000 whetstones. Those two stones have always been my favorite whetstones in terms of splash and goes. All of my tutorials are done with them. All of my repairs are done with them after I put them on the Otoma. I just love these whetstones. And so to see them here in person with my name on it, it's just so cool. And it's something that I will probably giggle over for a long time. Naniwa Abrasives Japan is a massive company. I think the bulk of their business comes from construction, commercial grade cutting tools, and their whetstones is just a small portion of the company's overall revenue stream. So going to Naniwa's headquarters, I was expecting kind of a small brick and mortar building, but it was this massive corporate building, and I think they own the entire building. It's like a really impressive building. At Naniwa's headquarters, I had a chance to sit down with the man who is responsible for everything whetstone related. And one thing led to the next, and next thing you know, the conversation kind of went from just whetstones to let's make a set of whetstones that I designed using my two favorite stones from Naniwa. So when designing this combo, I wanted to give the users the same sharpening experience and polishing experience that they would get using the regular, Naniwa Pro stones. So the ultimate decision was to make the stones 210 by 70 by 15 versus 210 by 70 by 20. It's roughly 25% thinner than the regular Pro stones, but you're still getting the same width and the same length of the Pro stones. And the reason we went that way was because we were originally going to glue these two stones together. And so you're wondering, well, if they're combo stones, why aren't they glued together? And this is one of those things that you just have to hear to believe, because this was actually, so the original goal was to have a single stone that was going to be glued together. But when I received the original samples of them, they came like this. They came two stones separately. And when I placed them on my table and I'm looking at them, I'm thinking, how cool is it to have two stones separate versus one stone? I just said, you know what? Let's just roll with it. If you guys are worried that these are, 25% thinner than the original standard size, don't worry about it. I had a set that I used for a good 3 years or so, almost close to 4 years, and I think I brought it down by 1 millimeter in the course of almost 4 years of using them. And I use those stones in my home for my personal knives and in the studio for my test knives as well. So I use those stones quite a bit. One of the biggest questions I got from people who carry around pocket knives and EDCs is, what whetstone can I buy that is not so large like a typical Japanese whetstone, but can give me the same sharpening experience? And for the last few years, I couldn't really think of a proper brand or a proper set of whetstones to recommend them. And so when I recommend them, the Choceras or the Pros, the Naniwa Pros, they said, yeah, it's just too large for me. During the design phase of these stones, I thought about these questions and I said, why don't we make a miniaturized version of this stone, the stone set, for those who just want something smaller but want something that is going to give them the experience and the pleasure of sharpening on pro quality Japanese whetstones. And so that's where the mini set came in. You're not losing out on sharpening feel and feedback. It's just the exact same stone, but miniaturized. So they are 175 millimeters long and 55 millimeters wide. They have the exact same thickness as the standard Riki stones, the 15 millimeters thick on both stones. It's not only great for those who carry pocket knives and EDCs, it's great for people who only want to use smaller knives in their kitchen. My wife likes to use 3 and 4 inch paring knives at home. She doesn't like using 8-inch shift knives. If she picked up knife sharpening, a miniaturized stone set like this would actually work pretty well for her. And I just want to say thank you to everyone who's watching, everyone who has commented on my channel, every subscriber, every Patreon supporter, everyone who's ever bought anything from my e-store. You guys have all made everything possible. Everything you guys see behind me, these whetstones, these knives with my names on them, it's all because of you guys. And I wish I can thank every one of you individually with a gift of some sort, but I can't. All I can say is thank you, thank you, thank you. I've got another small batch of knives that just arrived from my friends over at Nobu. With the worldwide pandemic that we're dealing with, there's so much negativity going on in the world, and I just want to put a smile on a dozen of your faces with this knife here. This is possibly one of the coolest, if not the coolest knife I've held this year. And it's 6-inch or 6.5 inch Kramer-esque profile. It's about 55 millimeters tall, which is something you don't see very often. And with just this beautiful, absolutely beautiful octagonal resin handle. It is so cool. So if you guys want one, leave in the comments. I don't care where you live. I don't care what you do. Let me know in the comments why you love cooking, why you love knives, and I will select 12 of you guys to receive this knife here for $1 plus the cost of shipping. It is so good to be here. It is so good to have you guys as my supporters. I am the most blessed man I know. And thank you guys for everything, and I will catch you guys in the next video.